Selena Quintanilla Perez was an American singer who achieved international fame as a member of Selena y Los Dinos and for her subsequent solo career in both Spanish and English. Her father and manager, Abraham Quintanilla Jr., appointed Yolanda Saldivar president of Selena's fan club in 1991 after Saldivar had repeatedly asked permission to start one. In January 1994, Saldivar was promoted to manager of the singer's boutiques. Soon Selena's employees, fashion designer, and cousin began complaining about Saldivar's management style. In January 1995, Quintanilla Jr. began receiving telephone calls and letters from angry fans who had sent membership payments and had received nothing in return. He began investigating their complaints and found evidence that Saldivar had embezzled $60,000 from the fan club and the boutiques using forged checks. After the Quintanilla family confronted her about this on the morning of March 31, 1995, Saldivar bought a gun and fatally shot Selena. Although doctors tried to revive Selena, she was pronounced dead from loss of blood and cardiac arrest. The Latino community was deeply affected by the news of Selena's death. Some people traveled thousands of miles to visit her home, boutiques, and the crime scene, while churches with large congregations of Latinos held prayers in her name. All major television networks in the United States interrupted their regular programming to break the news. The public's reaction to Selena's death was compared to those that followed the deaths of John Lennon, Kurt Cobain, and John F. Kennedy. Some Americans who were unaware of the singer and her popularity criticized the attention she and her murder received from both the media and the Latino community. Radio personality Howard Stern mocked Selena's murder, burial, and her mourners and criticized her music, playing her songs with gunshots in the background, causing an uproar among the Latino population. On April 12, 1995, 2 weeks after her death, then Texas Governor George W. Bush declared her birthday Selena Day in Texas, offending some Americans because Selena Day that year coincided with Easter. At the time of Selena's death, Tejano music was one of the most popular Latin music subgenres in the United States. She was called the Queen of Tejano music and became the first Latino artist to have a predominantly Spanish-language album. Dreaming of You, 1995, debut and peaked at #1 on the U.S. Billboard 200 chart. After her death, the popularity of Tejano music waned. During Saldivar's trial for the murder, called the trial of the century and the most important trial for the Latino population, Saldivar said she accidentally shot Selena while attempting suicide. Saldivar was found guilty of murder and was sentenced to life imprisonment. Jennifer Lopez was cast as Selena in a 1997 biopic film about her life and achieved fame after the film's release. Background: The Selena fan club. Selena was born on April 16, 1971, in Lake Jackson, Texas, to Abraham Quintanilla, Jr., a former musician, and Marcela Rafaela Quintanilla, née Zamora. Selena was introduced to the music industry by her father, who saw a way back into the music business after discovering Selena's perfect timing and pitch. He quickly organized his children into a band called Selena y Los Dinos, which included A.B. Quintanilla III on bass, Suzette Quintanilla on drums, and Selena as the lead singer. The band became the family's main source of income after they were evicted from their home during the Texas oil bust of 1982. They filed for bankruptcy after Quintanilla Jr.'s Mexican restaurant suffered as a result of the oil bust. The family moved to Corpus Christi, Texas, and Selena y Los Dinos began recording music professionally. In 1984, the band released its first LP record, Selena y Los Dinos, with a small, independent record company. Quintanilla Jr. wanted his children to record Tejano music, a male-dominated music genre popularized by Mexican Americans in the United States. Selena's popularity as a singer grew after she won the Tejano Music Award for Female Vocalist of the Year in 1987. She landed her first major record deal with capital EMI Latin in 1989. Yolanda Saldivar became a fan of Tejano music in the mid-1980s. She originally disliked Selena because Selena had won awards that Saldivar's favorite Tejano musicians were nominated in. In mid-1991, Saldivar attended one of Selena's concerts in San Antonio, Texas with her niece. She became an ardent Selena fan. She particularly enjoyed the singer's stage presence and especially liked the song, Baila esta cumbia. The day after the concert, Saldivar unsuccessfully searched newsstands for a souvenir of the event. She got the idea of starting a Selena fan club in the San Antonio area to promote the singer. According to Quintanilla, Jr., Saldivar tried contacting him and left him 15 messages. She said she left only 3. Quintanilla, Jr. contacted her to discuss her idea of starting a fan club. After meeting with Saldivar, he approved of her idea and gave her permission to proceed. Saldivar became the founder and acting president of the Selena Fan Club in San Antonio in June 1991. As president, she was responsible for membership benefits and collecting $22 in exchange for products promoting Selena, a t-shirt bearing the singer's name, exclusive interviews with the band, a fact sheet about Selena y Los Dinos, and notifications of upcoming concerts. Proceeds from the fan club were donated to charities. Suzette was the contact person between Saldivar and the Quintanilla family. Saldivar did not meet Selena until December 1991. The two became close friends and the Quintanilla family trusted her. By 1994, Saldivar had signed up more than 8,000 fans. According to television news reporter and anchorwoman Maria Celeste Araras, Saldivar had become the most efficient assistant the singer ever had. Araras wrote that people noticed how eager Saldivar was to impress Selena, and did anything the singer told her to do. One person told Araras, if Selena would say, jump, Alvar would jump 3 times. Saldivar gave up her career as an in-home nurse for patients with terminal cancer and respiratory diseases. She decided to fully invest her time in running the Selena fan club, although she was earning less than she had as a nurse. Selena Etc. Boutiques. In 1994, Selena opened 2 boutiques called Selena Etc. in Corpus Christi and San Antonio. They were equipped with in-house beauty salons. Quintanilla, Jr. thought Saldivar was a potential candidate to run the businesses because the family would be touring the country. He believed she was the best choice because of her success running the fan club. The family agreed. In January 1994, Saldivar became the manager of the boutiques. In September 1994, Selena signed Saldivar as her registered agent in San Antonio. After being hired to run the boutiques, Saldivar moved from South San Antonio to Corpus Christi to be closer to Selena. In an interview with Primer Impacto in 1995, Quintanilla, Jr. said he always mistrusted Saldivar, though the family never found anything odd about Saldivar's behavior. Saldivar was authorized to write and cash checks, and had access to bank accounts associated with the fan club and boutiques. Selena gave Saldivar her American Express card for the purpose of conducting company business. Saldivar, however, instead used it to rent Lincoln Town cars, entertain associates in upmarket restaurants, and buy 2 cellular telephones which she carried. Staff at Selena Etc. complained that Saldivar was always nice when Selena was around, but treated everyone terribly when Selena was away. In December 1994, the boutiques began to suffer. The company's bank accounts lacked sufficient funds to pay bills. Staff levels at both stores had been reduced from 38 to 14 employees, mainly because Saldivar fired those she did not like. The remaining employees began complaining to Selena about Saldivar, but Selena did not believe her friend would hurt her or her business. Employees reportedly told Selena that Saldivar was two-faced and was unstable. The employees then began to take their concerns to Quintanilla, Jr., who warned Selena that Saldivar might be a dangerous person. Selena did not believe Saldivar would turn on her. Her father had the habit of distrusting people. In January 1995, Deborah Ramirez, Selena's cousin, was hired to work in the boutiques and to help Selena expand the business into Mexico. Ramirez quit within a week, telling Saldivar she was dissatisfied with the failure of staff members to report sales. Ramirez also found receipts were missing from the sale of several boutique items. Saldivar told her to mind her business and that it was not her concern. Saldivar frequently clashed with Martin Gomez, Selena's fashion designer, who complained that Saldivar was mismanaging Selena's affairs. Their animosity intensified during Selena's fashion shows. Gomez accused Saldivar of mutilating or destroying some of his original creations and said she never paid bills. Gomez stated that Saldivar had established a reign of terror. The two were constantly complaining about each other to Selena. Saldivar began recording their conversations without Gomez's consent to persuade Selena he was not working for the boutique's best interests. Gomez was relegated to a supporting role when Selena decided to design her clothes herself. Between late 1994 and early 1995, Saldivar often traveled to Monterrey, Mexico, to expedite the process of opening another Selena etc. store. When Saldivar visited the factory in Mexico, she intimidated the seamstresses by telling them to either side with her or leave. Selena and Saldivar's relationship. Saldivar was receiving tokens of affection from Selena, which she was not accustomed to. Her room was covered with Selena posters and pictures, burning votive candles, and a library of Selena videos which she played to entertain guests. During an interview with Saldivar in 1995, reporters from the Dallas Morning News said her devotion to Selena bordered on obsession. Saldivar told employees at Selena etc. she wanted to be like Selena. According to an unnamed former employee, Saldivar was possessive of her relationship with Selena and tried to distance Selena from the other employees. This person believed that Saldivar's goal was to have more control over the employees and over Selena. Saldivar said her reason for distancing the employees from Selena was to shield the singer from the petty issues of managing her boutiques. Along with the responsibility of running the boutiques, Saldivar accompanied Selena on trips and had keys to the singer's house. When Saldivar became a business associate, their relationship began to deteriorate. In September 1994, Selena met Ricardo Martinez, a doctor who lived in Monterrey, Mexico. Selena wanted to expand the number of boutiques by opening a Selena etc. store in Monterrey. Martinez said he had contacts in Mexico who could help her grow her business. Martinez became a business advisor to Selena, though her family said he was simply a fan who posed in several pictures with her. Saldivar became envious of Selena's dependency on Martinez. He began sending flowers to Selena's hotel room. Saldivar warned the singer that Martinez might have unprofessional intentions. Selena began visiting Monterrey more frequently, often in disguise. Sebastian De Silva, Martinez's assistant, would pick up Selena at the airport. He said he noticed she was wearing wigs and using her husband Chris Perez's surname so others would not identify her. According to Martinez, he had lent several $1,000s to Selena because she was short on cash. Saldivar's termination of employment. Starting in January 1995, Quintanilla Jr. began receiving telephone calls and letters from angry fans who claimed to have paid their enrollment fees for the fan club, but had not received the promised memorabilia. Meanwhile, at both of Selena's boutiques in San Antonio and Corpus Christi, employees noted an influx of unpaid or overdue bills arriving in the mail, for which Saldivar could provide no plausible explanation. Upon investigation, Quintanilla Jr. discovered Saldivar had embezzled more than $60,000 using forged checks from both the fan club and the boutiques. Saldivar's brother, Armando Saldivar, supposedly contacted Gomez and made up a story that Saldivar was stealing money from the fan club. Gomez then contacted one of Selena's uncles by telephone. The uncle told Quintanilla, Jr. Armando said he was angry with Saldivar but did not want the reason to be made public. Later he said he felt guilty for starting the rumor. He appeared on the Spanish-language television news program Primer Impacto, but reporters found his comments illogical. Quintanilla, Jr. held a meeting on March 9, 1995, with Selena and Suzette Quintanilla at Q Productions to confront Saldivar. Quintanilla Jr. presented Saldivar with evidence concerning the missing funds. He said Saldivar simply stared at him without answering any of his questions. He further stated how Saldivar did not deny the accusations or say anything during the meeting but was emotional at times, and at other times just cool as ice. Quintanilla, Jr. told Saldivar he would involve police if she did not produce evidence that disproved his accusations. When Quintanilla, Jr. asked her why fans were not receiving the promised gift packages, Saldivar said those fans were trying to get the items for free. Quintanilla, Jr. discovered Saldivar had opened the fan club's bank account under her sister's name, Maria Elida. When asked why she had done this, she replied that the bank would not allow her to open an account in her name. She did not know the reason for this refusal. Saldivar abruptly left the meeting. Quintanilla, Jr. then banned Saldivar from contacting Selena. However, Selena did not want to end their friendship. She felt Saldivar was essential to the success of her clothing line in Mexico. Selena also wanted to keep Saldivar close because she had bank records, statements, and financial records necessary for tax purposes. Saldivar's name remained on the payroll after the meeting, though her termination was pending on the retrieval of the financial records that were stolen. On March 25, Selena told Suzette that she was planning on terminating Saldivar's employment. Soon after the meeting, Quintanilla, Jr. discovered the fan club's checks were signed with Maria Elida's signature in handwriting identical to Saldivar's. He concluded that Saldivar was writing forged checks using her sister's name, then cashing them and keeping the funds. When Quintanilla, Jr. was trying to retrieve the fan club's bank statements, he said they had vanished. He found a letter in Saldivar's handwriting stating that Maria Elida had to close the bank account because of a major problem. According to the letter, a member of the fan club, Ivan Perales, was sent to the bank to deposit $3,000, but Perales did not deposit the money and could not be found. The letter stated that Maria Elida found out about the situation too late and that Perales and the money were missing. Maria Elida then wrote checks to be cashed by Saldivar, even though the bank account had no funds. The letter said Maria Elida was closing the account for that reason and that the bank would have to cover the checks. Quintanilla, Jr. confronted Saldivar about Perales' identity. He said Saldivar knew nothing about her. Quintanilla, Jr. said Saldivar did not trust the treasurer of the fan club, but she had trusted a complete stranger to deposit $3,000. He told Saldivar to tell that lie to someone else. He concluded that Perales did not exist, since none of the fan club workers had ever met her. Failed attempts to kill Selena. The day after Saldivar was banned from contacting Selena, Quintanilla, Jr. drove to Q Productions and chased her from the premises and told her she was no longer welcome there. The same day, Selena and Saldivar argued by telephone. Selena hung up and told her husband she could no longer trust Saldivar. The singer and Perez were unsatisfied with Saldivar's explanation of items being unaccounted for. According to Quintanilla, Jr., there were 4 attempts to murder Selena. Selena removed Saldivar's name from the boutique's bank account on March 10, 1995. She was replaced as fan club president by Irene Herrera. The next day, Saldivar purchased a gun at a place to shoot, a gun shop and shooting range in San Antonio. She bought a Taurus Model 85 snub-nosed .38 caliber revolver and .38 caliber hollow point bullets. The bullets were designed to cause more extensive injuries than normal bullets. Saldivar told the clerk she needed protection in her job as an in-home nurse because a patient's relatives had threatened her. On March 13, Saldivar went to her lawyer and wrote her resignation, which Quintanilla Jr. believed was her alibi. The same day, Saldivar drove to Corpus Christi and checked into the Sand and Sea Motel. Selena was in Miami, Florida, at the time. Quintanilla Jr. believed this would have been the first attempt to kill Selena. When Selena arrived in Corpus Christi on March 14, Saldivar contacted her to schedule a meeting. Saldivar told Selena there was too much traffic and asked her to meet her at a parking lot 25 miles, 40 kilometers away from Corpus Christi. Upon arriving, Selena told Saldivar she could remain in charge of her business affairs in Mexico. According to Quintanilla Jr., Selena wanted to continue employing Saldivar until she could find a replacement. Saldivar showed Selena the gun she had bought. Selena told her to get rid of it and said she would protect Saldivar from her father, according to Saldivar and Perez. This, Quintanilla Jr. believed, had calmed Saldivar and was the reason she did not kill Selena in the parking lot. The next day, Saldivar returned the gun to the shop saying her father had given her a .22 caliber pistol. On March 26, Saldivar stole a perfume sample and more bank statements from Selena in Mexico. Saldivar accompanied Selena on a trip to Tennessee while the singer finished recording a song for her crossover album. Selena told Saldivar some bank statements were missing and asked her to return them as soon as they returned to Texas. Saldivar repurchased the gun on March 27 and asked Selena to meet her alone at a motel room. This was her second attempt to kill Selena. News of Selena's arrival spread and she was soon mobbed by fans. Quintanilla Jr. believed her fans saved her that day. There were too many witnesses. According to him, the third attempt to kill Selena was during Saldivar's trip to Monterrey in the last week of March. Dr. Martinez received telephone calls from Saldivar crying hysterically and saying she had been raped on March 29. The next day, Saldivar again called Dr. Martinez, who said the calls sounded as though someone was trying to snatch the telephone away from Saldivar. He sent an employee to her motel room to investigate. The employee found she had left a few minutes earlier. On March 30, Saldivar returned from her Monterrey trip and checked into a Days Inn motel. She contacted Selena and told her she had been raped. According to Quintanilla Jr., this was the last message they received from Saldivar. He believed this claim was her new alibi. Saldivar asked Selena to visit her at her motel room alone. However, her husband, Chris Perez, accompanied her. According to Perez, he waited by his truck as Selena went alone to Saldivar's motel room. As Perez was driving back to their house, Selena noticed Saldivar had failed to give her the correct bank statements she needed. Saldivar tried contacting Selena through her pager. She desperately wanted Selena to take her to a hospital that night. She told Selena she was bleeding due to her rape. Quintanilla Jr. believed Saldivar was trying to get Selena to return to the motel alone. Perez told Selena it was too late and did not want her to go out alone. Unbeknownst to Perez, Selena agreed to meet Saldivar the next morning. Murder on March 30, 1995, Selena contacted Leonard Wong about the perfume samples he had made for her. According to Wong, Selena told him she would be meeting Saldivar the next morning to pick up the samples that had been stolen from her. The same day, she told another employee at the boutique she was expecting to fire Saldivar. The employee followed Selena to her home that night because she was concerned over the singer after their discussion about Saldivar. At 7:30 a.m. CST on March 31, Selena left for Saldivar's motel room. At the motel, Saldivar told Selena she had been raped in Mexico. Selena took her to Doctors Regional Hospital, where medical staff noticed Saldivar showed clear symptoms of depression. Saldivar told medical staff she had bled a little. The staff noticed Selena angrily respond that Saldivar had told her the opposite, that she was bleeding copiously the day before. Nurse Carla Anthony informed Saldivar she needed to travel to San Antonio to obtain a gynecological examination because Saldivar was a resident of San Antonio, the hospital was in Corpus, and the rape occurred outside the country. While driving back to the motel, Selena told Saldivar it would be best if they stayed apart for a while to avoid upsetting Quintanilla, Jr. According to Dr. Martinez, Selena had tried to contact him that morning but he could not speak on the telephone because he was performing surgery. At 10 a.m. CST, Quintanilla, Jr. contacted Perez to determine Selena's whereabouts. She was due to record a song at Q Productions that morning and had not arrived. Perez called Selena on her mobile phone and reminded her of the scheduled recording. She told him she had forgotten the session and she was taking care of one last item of business and would be at Q Productions soon after. This was the last telephone call Selena answered and was the last time Perez spoke to his wife. At the motel room, Selena and Saldivar began arguing. Motel guests complained about loud noises coming from Saldivar's room. They said they heard two women arguing about business matters. Selena told Saldivar she could no longer be trusted, and demanded Saldivar return her financial papers. Selena then dumped Saldivar's satchel containing bank statements onto the bed and saw the gun. At 11:48 a.m. CST, Saldivar pointed it at Selena. As Selena tried to flee, Saldivar shot her once on the lower right shoulder, severing an artery and causing a massive loss of blood. Trinidad Espinosa, the hotel's maintenance man, reported hearing a loud bang, which he likened to a car engine misfiring. Selena was critically wounded. She ran towards the lobby, leaving a trail of blood 392 feet, 119 meters long. She was seen clutching her chest screaming, "Help me! Help me! I've been shot." Saldivar was still chasing after her, pointing a gun at her, and calling her a bitch. According to motel staff, Saldivar seemed calm and went back in her room after chasing Selena. According to Carlos Morales, who was waiting outside the motel, he heard screaming and saw Selena running towards him. She grabbed Morales and screamed, "They'll shoot me again." Motel staff noticed her clothes were soaked in blood when she approached the lobby. Selena collapsed on the floor at 11:49 a.m. CST as hotel general manager Barbara Schultz telephoned the emergency services. Selena screamed at the staff, telling them, "Lock the door, she'll shoot me again." The singer identified Saldivar as her assailant and gave the number of the room where she had been shot. She was mortally wounded and terrified when she identified Saldivar, having said her last words, "Yolanda, room 158. Shauna Villa and hotel sales manager Ruben De Leon tried to stop the flow of blood. Selena's condition began to deteriorate rapidly as motel staff attended to her. De Leon tried to talk to Selena but noticed she was beginning to lose consciousness. He said she was moaning and moving less often. De Leon noticed Selena's eyes had rolled back and that she went limp. An ambulance arrived at the scene in 1 minute and 55 seconds. The paramedics tore away the green sweater where the bleeding was taking place and applied a Vaseline gauze to Selena's wound, which stopped the surface bleeding. Selena's heartbeat was now very slow. A paramedic performed cardiopulmonary resuscitation to keep her blood circulating. Paramedic Richard Fredrickson said, it was too late when he arrived in the lobby. He found a thick pool of blood from her neck to her knees, all the way around on both sides of her body. Fredrickson could not locate a pulse. When he placed his fingers on her neck, he felt only muscle twitches. A paramedic tried inserting an intravenous needle into Selena, but her veins had collapsed because of the massive blood loss and low, or no, blood pressure, making the insertion extremely difficult. Local police closed off Navigation Boulevard. When paramedics delivered Selena to Corpus Christi Memorial Hospital at 12 p.m. CST, her pupils were fixed and dilated, There was no evidence of neurological function, she had no vital signs, and was declared clinically brain dead. Doctors were able to establish an erratic heartbeat long enough to transfer her to the trauma room. Doctors began blood transfusions in an attempt to re-establish blood circulation after opening Selena's chest and finding massive internal bleeding. Selena's right lung was damaged, her collarbone was shattered, and her veins were emptied of blood. Doctors widened her chest opening, administered drugs into her heart, and applied pressure to her wounds. Dr. Louis Elkins, cardiac surgeon, arrived at Memorial Hospital and said he saw doctors making heroic efforts to revive Selena. He described the singer as being extremely confused and shredded. The right side of her chest, all the tissue was ripped. By the time Elkins arrived, an emergency doctor began massaging her heart after it had stopped beating. Elkins reported how all efforts were futile and said had he been the receiving doctor, he would not have made any treatments on Selena. He felt obligated to continue after an emergency room doctor made the decision to revive the singer. Elkins said a pencil-sized artery leading from the heart had been cut in two by the hollow-point bullet and that 6 units of blood from the transfusion had spilled out from her circulatory system. A breathing tube was administered after Selena stopped breathing on her own, while a clamp was placed on her gushing, pierced artery on her collarbone. After 50 minutes, the doctors realized the damage was irreparable. Selena Quintanilla Perez was pronounced dead at 1:05 p.m. CST at age 23, 16 days before her 24th birthday, from blood loss and cardiac arrest. During the third hour after the shooting, an autopsy was performed due to overwhelming media interest. It revealed that the bullet had entered Selena's upper right back, near her shoulder blade, passed through her chest cavity, severed the right subclavian artery, and exited her right upper chest. It took minutes from the point of impact of the bullet that Selena lost virtually all the blood in her body, which contributed to her rapidly bleeding to death. Doctors said that if the bullet had been only 1 millimeter higher or lower, the wound would have been less severe. Standoff. After the shooting, Saldivar entered her pickup truck and tried to leave the motel parking lot. Motel employee Rosario Garza saw Saldivar leave her room with a wrapped towel. It was later thought she was going to Q Productions to shoot Quintanilla, Jr. and others who were waiting for Selena. However, she was spotted by a responding police officer in a vehicle. The officer left his vehicle, drew his gun, and ordered Saldivar out of the truck. Saldivar did not comply. She backed up and parked adjacent to 2 cars. Her truck was then blocked in by the police vehicle. Saldivar picked up the pistol, pointed it at her right temple, and threatened to commit suicide. A SWAT team and the FBI Crisis Negotiation Unit were brought in. Musicologist Emilza Novas later said the event was reminiscent of O.J. Simpson's planned suicide 10 months earlier. Larry Young and Isaac Valencia began negotiating with Saldivar. They ran a telephone line to their base of operations adjacent to Saldivar's pickup truck as the standoff continued. Lead negotiator Young tried to establish a rapport with Saldivar and persuade her to give herself up. Valencia suggested the shooting was accidental. Saldivar later changed her story, saying the gun went off by itself. She spoke to relatives in addition to speaking with police. Motel guests were ordered to remain in their rooms until police escorted them out. Later that afternoon, police drained the gasoline from the gas tank of Saldivar's car and turned on floodlights. After the standoff entered its 4th hour, Valencia succeeded in getting Saldivar to confess that she had intended to shoot herself. Saldivar said when she placed the gun to her own head, Selena tried to tell her not to kill herself. When Selena opened the door to leave, Saldivar said she told her to close it. She also said the gun went off when Selena left. During the 6th hour, Saldivar agreed to give herself up, but when she saw a police officer pointing a rifle at her, she panicked, ran back to her truck, picked up the revolver, and pointed it at her head again. Saldivar surrendered after more than 9 hours. By then, Hundreds of Selena's fans had gathered at the scene. Many wept as police took Selena away. A press conference was called within hours of Selena's murder. Selena had not yet been named in media reports. Assistant Police Chief Ken Bungan Quintanilla, Jr. told the press the possible motive was Selena's intention to terminate Selena's employment. Impact. Media response. When radio station KDAM broke the news of Selena's death, many people accused the staff of lying because the next day was April Fool's Day. In San Antonio, major Spanish-language radio stations including Tejano 107, KXTN-FM, KRIO-FM and KDAM, began monitoring developments. Radio stations in Texas began playing Selena's music non-stop and taking telephone calls from distressed fans. All major U.S. networks interrupted their regular programming to break the news. The lead item on national television network evening news programs in Corpus Christi had been the end of the 1994-95 Major League Baseball strike. Within 30 minutes of its announcement, Selena's murder was the lead item on all television stations in South Texas. Her death was front-page news in the New York Times for 2 days, and was featured prominently on BBC World News. News of the singer's death reached Japan, where David Byrne first heard of the shooting. Univision and Telemundo were among the first national news stations to arrive at the crime scene. Coverage of the singer's death and the murder trial dominated American newscasts. In 1995, Carlos Lopez of KMIQ 105.1 told the Corpus Christi Caller-Times that Tejano music is dead for at least today, and compared the reactions to Selena's death to reactions to the Wall Street crash of 1929 and called March 31, 1995, Black Friday. The media response Selena received was unprecedented for a Latin artist, and Hispanic writers expressed how the mainstream media typically ignores people from the border. Newsstands were swarmed by people looking for items concerning Selena. A line for the edition of April 1, 1995, of the Corpus Christi Caller-Times formed. The company added 11,000 copies to their print run and later printed 20,000 more copies to meet continued demand for the paper. Texas newspaper The Monitor sold out 2 issues in the days following the singer's death, a truly remarkable feat, said writer Daniel Cavazos. He continued that the event of a newspaper issue selling out happens once every 2-3 decades. A People magazine issue was released several days after her murder. Its publishers believed interest would soon wane. They released a commemorative issue within a week when it became apparent that interest was growing. The issue sold nearly 1 million copies, selling the entire first and second run within 2 weeks. It became a collector's item, a first in the history of People. Betty Cortina, editor of People, told Biography, "It was unheard of for an issue to completely sell out." In the following months, the success of the Selena issue led the company to release People on Espanol aimed at the Latino market. This was followed by Newsweek on Espanol and Latino magazine. American actress Jennifer Lopez was cast to play Selena in the 1997 biopic film about her life. This choice drew criticism because Lopez's ancestry is Puerto Rican rather than Mexican. After the film's release, fans changed their views on Lopez after seeing her performance in the movie. Lopez became famous after the film's release. Selena's life and career were covered by a number of television programs, including The Oprah Winfrey Show, E! True Hollywood Story, VH1's Behind the Music, American Justice, Snapped, and Famous Crime Scene. Other networks including MTV, Investigation Discovery, The Biography Channel, and A&E Network have aired special programs about Selena, while Spanish-language networks regularly show documentaries to commemorate the anniversary of her death. These Spanish-language documentaries often score record ratings for Spanish networks. A documentary titled Selena, A Star is Dimmed, one of the first about her, was broadcast on Univision's Primer Impacto on April 22, 1995. It was watched by 2.09 million people and became the second most viewed Spanish-language show in the history of American television at the time. Networks competed with each other to interview Saldivar about the shooting. When the news came out that Araras was able to interview her, Univision was inundated with requests to use the interview from major networks as far away as Germany. The interview on Primer Impacto was watched by 4.5 million viewers. It was the most watched program that night according to the Nielsen ratings, and became one of the most watched Spanish-language programs in American television history. Latino community. The news of Selena's death deeply affected the Latino community. Many people traveled thousands of miles to visit Selena's house, boutiques, and the crime scene. Hispanics throughout the United States reportedly mourned the singer as far away as New York City and Los Angeles. By mid-afternoon, police were asked to form a detour as a line of automobiles began backing up traffic from the Quintanillas' house. On the street where Selena had lived, gang graffiti and cacti distinguished the blue-collar community from other subdivisions across America. A chain-link fence in front of Selena's house became a shrine festooned with mementos as fans from across America left messages to Selena and the Quintanilla family. Most car drivers in Corpus Christi, and those driving cars on Interstate 37 from Mexico, turned their headlights on in her memory. Fans scribbled notes and messages, and placed them on the door and doorstep of the room in which Selena had been shot. Soon after learning of Selena's death, people began speculating about the identity of her murderer. Some fans thought Emilio Navarre's wife had shot Selena. They believed she was jealous of Selena and Navarre's relationship. Johnny Pasillas, Emilio's brother-in-law and manager, frantically called radio stations in an attempt to quash the rumor. Among the celebrities who believed the rumor were record producer Manny Guerra, Pete Rodriguez, and American singer Ramon Hernandez. According to anchorwoman Araras, Selena's death became the most important news story of the year for Latinos. Texas Monthly editor Pamela Koloff wrote that reactions to her death were equivalent to those following a political assassination. Reactions were compared to those that followed the deaths of John Lennon, Elvis Presley, and John F. Kennedy. Selena had a cult-like following among Latinos. After her death she became a household name in the United States and a part of the American pop culture. She was more popular after her death than when she was alive. Selena became a cultural icon for Latinos and was seen as a woman who was proud of her roots, who had achieved her dreams. According to Antonio Lopez of the Santa Fe New Mexican, the day Selena was killed is a bookmark in time in the memories of many Latinos. According to Araras, women imitated her, men worshipped her. In the aftermath of Selena's murder, 2 linked deaths in California were reported. A drag queen planned to dress as Selena for a performance. He was hit by a car and left to die. Actress Gloria de la Cruz auditioned for the role of Selena. Her body was later found in a dumpster in Los Angeles. Her killer had strangled her and set her body on fire. Celebrities and politicians' reactions. Spanish singer Julio Iglesias interrupted a recording session in Miami for a moment of silence. Among the celebrities who contacted the Quintanilla family following the news were Gloria Estefan, Celia Cruz, Iglesias, and Madonna. Concerts throughout Texas were canceled. La Mafia canceled their concert in Guatemala and flew back to Texas. Tejano singer Ramiro Herrera and dozens of other Tejano artists also canceled their concerts. Ben Benavides, radio personality and owner of Tejano Review, told Corpus Christi Caller Times that March 31st would be remembered as the worst day in Corpus Christi history. American singer-songwriter Red Lawrence published an advertisement in Billboard magazine's April 22, 1995 issue. It said, "Music I heard with you was more than music. You will be deeply missed." Other celebrities interviewed on radio stations, including Stephanie Riddle, Jamie Deanda, of Los Camicos, Elsa Garcia, and Shelley Lers, expressed their thoughts about Selena's death. Talk show host Oprah Winfrey called Selena's life short but significant during the March 1997 episode of The Oprah Winfrey Show. American singer-songwriter Mariah Carey told MTV Selena's death was shocking to her because of the way it had happened so abruptly in a young life. American singer Mark Anthony dedicated his album To Do a Su Tiempo, which was released 2 months after Selena's death, to Selena. State Senator Carlos Druin and State Representative Solomon P. Ortiz reportedly mourned Selena's death. American music industry executive Daniel Glass told Texas Monthly he believed Selena would have enjoyed greater career success had it not been for her death. A few days after her death, President of the United States Bill Clinton and his wife Hillary sent a letter of condolence to Selena's husband Chris Perez. A few days later, Howard Stern mocked Selena's murder, burial, and mourners, and criticized her music. Stern said, "This music does absolutely nothing for me. Alvin and the Chipmunks have more soul, Spanish people have the worst taste in music. They have no depth." He then played Selena's songs with gunshot noises in the background. Stern's comments and actions outraged and infuriated the Latino community in Texas. After an arrest warrant for disorderly conduct was issued for him, Stern made an on-air statement, in Spanish, saying his comments were not made to cause more anguish to her family, friends and those who loved her. The League of United Latin American Citizens found Stern's apology unacceptable and urged a boycott of his show. Texas retailers removed products related to Stern. Sears and McDonald's sent a letter expressing their disapproval of Stern's comments to the media because fans believed they sponsored his show. Within a week, on NBC's The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, Stern and his co-host Robin Quivers were asked if Stern's remarks about Selena were acceptable. Quivers decided not to talk about the situation to avoid arguing with Stern. When Linda Ronstadt, a pop singer of Mexican-American heritage, appeared on the show, she and Quivers argued when Ronstadt defended Selena. Other reactions on April 12, 1995, 2 weeks after Selena's death, Texas Governor George W. Bush declared her birthday Selena Day in Texas. Bush said Selena represented the essence of South Texas culture. On Selena Day, approximately 1,000 fans gathered at her grave and began singing traditional Mexican folk songs. Police were brought in to control the crowd. On the same day, a crowd of 3,000 attended an organized Mass of the Resurrection for Selena at Johnnyland Concert Park. In April and May that year, some European Americans in Texas wrote to the editor of the Sport Facts questioning the fuss over her death. Some were offended because Selena Day coincided with Easter Sunday. Others said, Easter is more important than Selena Day, and believed people should let Selena rest in peace and get on with their lives. Mexican Americans living in Texas also wrote to the newspaper. Some felt that others were too critical of Selena Day, stating they did not need to celebrate the day and should not have responded to its announcement so rudely. This was also seen by the Corpus Christi Caller-Times, which said it had printed several of the negative comments left by people and that many other comments were unprintable. Latino filmmaker Lourdes Portillo said she did not know who Selena was when she heard about the shooting. The Monitor received negative backlash from some readers who felt it was enough of having Selena featured on the front page of their newspaper. A reader called the Monitor and stated that intelligent people had no interest in Selena. In response, an editor said, "I hope not. That would make for a lot of idiots in South Texas." When the news of Selena's death broke, some Americans asked who she was and said she was not that important, suggesting Latinos get over it. Author and Texas Monthly magazine contributor Joe Nick Potosky said Anglo-Americans and Mexican-Americans were divided in their reactions to Selena's death. Potosky said that Anglo-Americans didn't understand what all the fuss was about. This was echoed in the Corpus Christi Caller-Times, where they found racial divisions in the reactions to Selena's death. Educators who had observed the reactions said, the emergence of an icon in a minority culture can be both bewildering and threatening to Anglos. Millicent Rothschild said some Americans often do not understand the cultural role models of groups who have felt discriminated against. Following Selena's death, cultural confrontations were reported. Some vocally opposed any memorials to the singer, feeling they would be paid for by taxpayers. Others complained to newspapers about the media interest in Selena's death. Many media outlets received negative comments from people around the country. Some were baffled that the Rosslyn massacre, which occurred around the same time of Selena's death, did not generate the same amount of media exposure. Mayor Mary Rhodes said many of the people complaining about the media exposure Selena was receiving had never heard of her. Ramiro Burr of the San Antonio Express-News confirmed that the reactions of non-Hispanics were due to a language barrier. Dolph Tillotson, a columnist in the Galveston Daily News, was mystified about his newspaper's coverage on Selena's death, whom he never heard of. Tillotson was baffled that the singer was important to Hispanics and relatively unknown to most European Americans. He wrote how grateful he was to the newspaper's Hispanic staff who explained the singer's cultural importance to him. In the 1997 biopic film about Selena, a store manager asks Latinos running towards the singer for an autograph, "Who's Selena?" European Americans felt the scene was irrelevant and over-dramatized. One Selena fan said the event depicted in the scene happens all the time to Latinos and their friends, and that they felt their community had been ignored. Lorraine Miller said, "Selena has opened my eyes," and that Miller had become more American. Another fan said, "Nobody ever lets you forget you are Mexican American in the U.S." Music industry at the time of Selena's death, 52% of all Latin music sales were generated by regional Mexican music. Most of this was Tejano, which had become one of the most popular Latin music genres. Selena's music led the genre's 1990s revival and made it marketable for the first time. Many media outlets describe her as the Queen of Tejano music. Major record companies including EMI Records, SBK Records, Warner Music Group, CBS Records, and Sony Music began signing Tejano artists to compete in the Latin music market. Following Selena's death, the Tejano music market suffered and its popularity waned. Radio stations in the United States that played Tejano music switched to regional Mexican music, and by 1997, KQQK was the only radio station playing non-stop Tejano music. By the mid-2000s, radio stations in the United States no longer played Tejano music, large auditoria stopped hosting Tejano artists by 2007, and major record companies abandoned their Tejano artists after 1995. Selena remains the best-selling Tejano artist of all time, and continues to outsell living Tejano artists. She remains the only Tejano musician whose recordings continue to chart on the U.S. Billboard 200 chart. After her death, Tejano music was replaced with Latin pop as the most popular Latin music genre in the United States. Within hours of Selena's murder, record stores sold out of her albums. EMI Latin began pressing several million CDs and cassettes to meet the expected demand. Gloria Ballesteros, a sales representative of Southwestern Wholesalers in San Antonio, told Billboard their inventory of 5,000 copies of Selena albums was sold out by the afternoon of her death. Record stores ordering more copies of her recordings were told by EMI Latin representatives they would not be able to restock for a few days. EMI Latin shipped 500,000 units of Selena's recordings to stores in the 2 weeks following her death. Her song, Fotos y Recuerdos, was number 4 on the U.S. Billboard Hot Latin Tracks chart the day she was killed. It peaked at number 1 on April 15, 1995. Selena's singles, No Me Queda Más, Bidi Bidi Boom Boom, Como La Flor, and Amor Prohibido, re-entered the Hot Latin Tracks and the regional Mexican airplay chart in the issue of Billboard magazine dated April 15, 1995. Selena's 1994 album Amor Prohibido re-entered the Billboard 200 chart at number 92, representing a 520% increase in sales. 12,040 units sold the week Selena was murdered. The following week, the album rose to number 32 with 28,238 units sold, representing a 135% increase. Amor Prohibido, which was positioned at number 4 on March 31st, peaked at number 1 on the top Latin albums chart in the issue dated April 15, 1995. 3 albums: Enter a Mi Mundo, 1992, Live, 1993, and 12 Super Éxitos, 1994, re-entered the top Latin albums chart, while Selena's albums took chart positions 1 to 4 on the regional Mexican albums chart that same week. Her albums sparked a buying frenzy for Latin music in Japan, Germany, and China. Dreaming of You, the crossover album Selena was working on at the time of her death, was released in July 1995. On the day of its release, 175,000 copies were sold in the U.S., a record for a female vocalist, and 331,000 copies sold in its first week. Selena became the third female artist after Janet Jackson and Mariah Carey to sell over 300,000 units in 1 week. It debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 chart, becoming the first album by a Latino artist to do so. Dreaming of You was the first posthumous album by a solo artist to debut at number 1. The recording was among the top 10 best-selling debuts for a musician, and was the best-selling debut by a female act. Dreaming of You joined 5 of Selena's studio albums on the Billboard 200 chart simultaneously, making her the first female artist in Billboard history to accomplish this feat. The Recording Industry Association of America, RIAA, certified it 59x Platinum for sales of 3.54 million album equivalent units in the U.S. as of October 2017. It has sold over 2.942 million copies in the United States, becoming the best-selling Latin album of all time in the country according to Nielsen SoundScan. As of 2015, the recording has sold 5 million copies worldwide. 5 of Selena's albums generated $4 million in sales within 5 years. Selena was inducted into the Billboard Latin Music Hall of Fame, the Hard Rock Cafe's Hall of Fame in 1995, the South Texas Music Hall of Fame, and the Tejano Music Hall of Fame in 2001. In December 1999, she was named the Top Latin Artist of the 90s and Best-Selling Latin Artist of the Decade by Billboard for her 14 top 10 singles, including 7 number 1 hits, in the top Latin songs chart. Funeral and tributes on the day Selena was killed, vigils and memorials were held throughout Texas and California. Radio station Tejano 107 sponsored a candlelight vigil at the Sunken Gardens, while KRIO-FM sponsored another at South Park Mall on March 31st, which was attended by 5,000 people. Radio stations in Texas played her music non-stop. On April 1st, Bayfront Plaza in Corpus Christi held a vigil which drew 3,000 fans. During the event, it was announced that a public viewing of the casket would be held at the Bayfront Auditorium the following day. Fans lined up for almost a mile, 1,500 meters. An hour before the doors opened, rumors that the casket was empty began circulating, which prompted the Quintanilla family to have an open casket viewing. About 30,000 to 40,000 fans passed by Selena's casket. More than 78,000 signed a book of condolence. Flowers for the casket viewing were imported from the Netherlands. At the request of Selena's family, video and flash photography were banned. The same day, an unannounced bilingual Sunday morning mass for Selena featuring a mariachi choir was held at the San Fernando Cathedral in downtown San Antonio. In the United States, churches with a high proportion of Latino worshippers held prayers for Selena. A reporter noticed that many mythic symbols such as the Christian symbols of angels, saints, healers, and saviors were attached to Selena by fans. There was a tribute for the singer during a St. Patrick's Day celebration in a Catholic church in Houston, Texas. Priest Father Sal DeGeorge decided to hold a tribute to Selena that day after people especially children, asked him what was being planned for the singer. That same day, a disc jockey played Selena's music near the church in a small park. On April 3, 1995, 600 guests, mostly family members, attended Selena's burial at Seaside Memorial Park, which was broadcast live by a Corpus Christi and San Antonio radio station without the consent of her family. A Jehovah's Witness minister from Lake Jackson preached in English, quoting Paul the Apostle's words in 1 Corinthians 15. Hundreds of people began circling the area in their vehicles. Among the celebrities who attended the funeral were Roberto Pulido, Bobby Pulido, David Lee Garza, Navarro, Laura Canales, Elsa Garcia, La Mafia, Ram Herrera, Imagine Latina, and Pete Astudillo. A special mass held the same day at Los Angeles Sports Arena drew a crowd of 4,000. Selena had been booked to play there that night for her Amor Prohibido tour. The promoter charged an admission fee, which upset Quintanilla, Jr. Modesto Lopez Portillo drove from El Salvador to Los Angeles to be the officiating priest for the gathering. The Consul General of El Salvador attended as well. In Lake Jackson, 1,000 fans and friends of Selena gathered at the municipal park in neighboring Clute, where she had played at the Mosquito Festival in July 1994. The next day, Our Lady of the Pillar, a church in Zaragoza, Spain, held a mass for Selena which drew 450 people to the 225-seat church. In the weeks following her death, cars throughout Texas were seen with pictures of Selena painted on them. On April 28, during a fireworks display for Buccaneer Days in Corpus Christi, the music was reworked to include "Biddy Biddy Boom Boom" in her memory. Selena etc. boutiques became shrines to the singer as fans left balloons, flowers, pictures, and poems. Street murals of Selena were found across Texas after her death. In the months following Selena's death, an average of 12,000 people visited her grave site and the Days Inn motel where the shooting occurred. The motel's manager rearranged its room numbers so guests would not know in which room Selena had been shot. The singer became part of the Day of the Dead celebration. In 1997, Selena was commemorated with a museum and a life-size bronze statue, Mirador de la Flor, in Corpus Christi, which are visited by hundreds of fans each week. Fans flock to her statue and murals, seeing them as symbols of self-identity, unionism, religious expression, resistance, self-expression, equality, liberation, passion, optimism, possibility, and encouragement and hope to the poor. Musicians used music to express their thoughts about Selena or recorded compositions as tributes to her. These included American country artist Tony Joe White, Haitian singer-songwriter Wyclef Jean, American Tejano artist Pete Astudillo, Puerto Rican group The Barrio Boys, Mexican-American singer Graciela Beltran, American Tejano artist Jennifer Peña, American hip-hop singer Lil Ray, American Tejano artist Emilio Navarria, Bobby Pulido, Cuban salsa singer Celia Cruz, Dominican salsa singer Jose Alberto, El Canario, Puerto Rican salsa singers Ray Sepulveda, Michael Stewart, Manny Manuel, Puerto Rican jazz singer Hilton Ruiz, American singer Jenny Rivera, Mexican singer Lupillo Rivera, Venezuelan rock singer Michael Aranchon, Puerto Rican singer Tony Garcia, and American rapper King L. Selena's family and her former band Los Dinos held a tribute concert a week after the 10th anniversary of her murder on April 7, 2005. The concert, titled Selena, VIVE, was broadcast live on Univision and achieved a 35.9 household rating. It was the highest rated and most viewed Spanish-language television special in the history of American television. It was the most watched program, regardless of language, among adults ages 18 to 34 in Los Angeles, Chicago, and San Francisco. It tied for first in New York, beating that night's episode of Fox's American Idol. Among Latino viewers, figures for Selena, VIVE, exceeded those for Super Bowl 45 between the Packers and the Steelers and the telenovela Soy Tu Buena, during what was the most-watched NFL season ever among Latinos. In January 2015, it was announced that a two-day annual event called Fiesta de la Flor would be held in Corpus Christi by the Corpus Christi Visitors Bureau as a tribute to Selena. Musical acts for the first annual event included Cumbia All-Stars, Chris Perez, Los Lobos, Jay Perez, Little Joe y La Familia, Los Palominos, Stefani Montiel of Los Three Divas, Girl in a Coma's Nina Diaz, Los Phoenix, and The Voice competitor Clarissa Serna. The event raised $13 million and was attended by 52,000 people, 72% of whom lived outside Corpus Christi. The event sparked interest from people in 35 U.S. states and 5 countries including Mexico, Brazil, and Ecuador. Trial. Within 20 minutes of Saldivar's surrender, she was taken to the downtown police station in Corpus Christi and placed in an interrogation room with investigators Paul and Ray Rivera. Paul Rivera, who had investigated homicides since 1978, informed Saldivar of her right to an attorney, which she waived. When police investigators surrounded Saldivar's truck, she had cried out, "I can't believe I killed my best friend." Within hours, she was saying the shooting was accidental. Saldivar's bail bond was initially set at $100,000, but District Attorney Carlos Valdez persuaded the presiding judge to raise it to $500,000. When bail was announced, fans asked why the death penalty had not been sought. The Nueces County Jail was deluged with death threats and there were public calls for vigilante justice. Some gang members in Texas were reported to have taken up collections to raise the bond for Saldivar so they could kill her when she was released. In prison, she faced more death threats from inmates. The Mexican mafia, a dominant gang in the Texas penal system, reportedly placed a price on her head and spread the word that anyone who committed the crime would be a hero. Saldivar's crime was punishable by up to 99 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. Saldivar was kept at Nueces County Jail under a suicide watch before her trial. The state had difficulty arranging defense counsel for Saldivar. A spokesperson said any lawyer defending Saldivar could face death threats. She was assigned a public defender named Douglas Tinker. Tinker's wife feared they would suffer from community retribution and asked him not to take the case. Tinker chose Arnold Garcia, a former district prosecutor, as his legal counsel. Valdez, who lived a few blocks away from the Quintanilla family, chose Mark Skirka as his legal counsel. Judge Mike Westergren presided over the case, which was moved to the Harris County Courthouse in Houston, Texas, to ensure an impartial jury. According to the Chicago Tribune, the Selena murder trial's publicity rivaled that of the O.J. Simpson proceedings. Westergren ordered that the trial would not be televised or taped, and limited the number of reporters in the courtroom to avoid a repeat of the Simpson circus. The Chicago Tribune reported the division of interest in the trial between Latinos and white Americans. Donna Dickerson, a white American magazine publisher, told the Chicago Tribune she had no interest in the trial because of Selena's Latino's background, and said Mexican Americans had not shown the same enthusiasm when Elvis Presley was found dead. The Selena murder trial was called the trial of the century and the most important trial to the Latino population, and generated interest in Europe, South America, Australia, and Japan. Saldivar pleaded not guilty, saying the shooting was accidental. In his opening statement, Valdez said he believed Saldivar deliberately killed Selena. Valdez also called it a senseless and cowardly act because Selena was shot in the back. Tinker said the shooting was accidental and denied rumors Saldivar wanted to be romantically involved with Selena. On October 23, 1995, the jury deliberated for 2 hours before finding Saldivar guilty of murder. She received the maximum sentence of life in prison with no eligibility of parole for 30 years. On November 22, 1995, she arrived at the Gatesville Unit, now the Christina Crane Unit, in Gutchville, Texas, for processing. As of 2018, Saldivar is serving her sentence in Gatesville at the Mountain View Unit, which is operated by the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. She will be eligible for parole on March 30, 2025. Because of multiple internal death threats from incarcerated Selena fans, Saldivar was placed in isolation and spends 23 hours a day alone in her 9 by 6 feet, 2.7 by 1.8 meters cell. In 2002, under a judge's order, the gun used to kill Selena was destroyed and the pieces were thrown into Corpus Christi Bay. Fans and historians disapproved of the decision to destroy the gun, saying the event was historical and the gun should have been in a museum. See also 1995 in music. 1995 in Latin music. 1995 in the United States. Christina Grimmie, governorship of George W. Bush. History of the United States. 1991 present. History of Texas. Murder of John Lennon. Rebecca Schaeffer. Notes. References. Sources.